On these 7 places on Earth, you cannot legally set foot. Some are guarded by militaries, some by laws written specifically for them, some by the people who live on them, with arrows. They include an island where the residents have killed every outsider who has approached it for at least 60 years. A cave in France whose air, after 17,000 years, killed the paintings on its walls within 2 decades of being opened. A volcano-born island in the North Atlantic that scientists watch grow from a single building, the door of which they are not allowed to open. A nuclear bunker city in the Ural Mountains that does not appear on any Russian census. And a vault buried inside an Arctic mountain that is opened on average twice a year by a list of people who can be counted on 2 hands. What unites them is that the access restrictions are not bureaucratic. They are absolute. There is no permit. There is no fee. There is no version of the request that ends with you setting foot inside. In a century where it is possible to summit Everest by helicopter, to stand at the geographic North Pole on an organized tour, and to descend in a submersible to the wreck of the Titanic, these are the places that have remained, in 2026, deliberately closed. This is the cartography of refusal. The first is in the Bay of Bengal. North Sentinel Island is part of the Andaman Archipelago, administered by India. It is 60 square kilometers, roughly the size of Manhattan, covered in tropical forest and ringed by coral reefs that prevent large vessels from approaching. It sits 50 kilometers west of the main Andaman group. By estimates compiled from aerial reconnaissance and the limited contact attempts, it is inhabited by between 50 and 200 people, known as the Sentinelese. The Sentinelese are the last completely uncontacted people on Earth who actively resist contact with outsiders. They are believed, by linguistic and genetic analysis from related Andamanese groups, to have lived on or near the island for as long as 60,000 years, descendants of one of the earliest waves of human migration out of Africa. Their language is unintelligible to speakers of any neighboring Andamanese language. They have, by all available evidence, no agriculture, no boats capable of leaving the reef, and no metal except for what they have salvaged from shipwrecks and refashioned into arrow tips. Their relationship with the outside world has been written, with rare exception, in violence. In 1880, a British colonial party kidnapped 6 Sentinelese and brought them to Port Blair. The 2 adults died within days. The 4 children were returned to the island with gifts. In 1974, a National Geographic film crew approached the shore. The director was shot in the thigh with an arrow. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen who drifted onto the island in their sleep were killed. Their bodies were recovered by helicopter, the rescue team unable to land. In November 2018, an American missionary named John Allen Chow, 26, paid local fishermen to drop him near the island. He intended to convert the Sentinelese to Christianity. He was killed within hours of landing by arrows. The fisherman reported seeing his body being dragged across the beach. The Indian government, after deliberation, decided not to recover it. The recovery operation would have required the killing of Sentinelese to retrieve a body from people who had not invited him. The Indian government, under the Andaman and Nicobar Islands Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Regulation of 1956, maintains a 3-mile exclusion zone around the island. No vessel may approach. Aircraft may not overfly below specified altitudes. Photography from offshore is prohibited. Indian Navy and Coast Guard patrol vessels enforce the exclusion. The Sentinelese are, in 2026, more genuinely off-limits than any other community of human beings on the planet, protected from contact partly for their sake, since they have no immunity to common pathogens that would likely kill them within weeks of sustained exposure. You cannot visit North Sentinel Island. The penalty is, in the strictest sense, not legal. It is biological. The second is also an island, also a refusal of access, but for opposite reasons. Ilha da Queimada Grande sits 33 kilometers off the coast of Sao Paulo, Brazil. It is small, 0.43 square kilometers, or roughly 43 hectares. It is uninhabited by humans. It is inhabited, by some estimates, by between 2,000 and 4,000 snakes of a single species, Bothrops insularis, the golden lancehead viper. The golden lancehead exists nowhere else on Earth. It was isolated on the island when rising sea levels separated Queimada Grande from the mainland approximately 11,000 years ago. Its venom is the most potent of any pit viper in the Americas, by some measurements 3 to 5 times more potent than that of its mainland cousin, the Bothrops jararaca, which is itself responsible for the majority of snakebite fatalities in Brazil. The golden lancehead evolved this venom for a specific reason. Its primary prey on the island is migratory birds, which the snake cannot pursue if they fly away after being bitten. The venom is therefore designed to be fast, to kill or paralyze a bird in seconds. The estimated density of golden lanceheads on the island is, by various surveys, 1 snake for every 1 to 5 square meters across its inhabited zones. The Brazilian Navy has prohibited landing on the island since the 1920s. The only exceptions are scientific expeditions, which require permits from the Brazilian Institute of Environment, Federal Navy escort, and the presence of a doctor with antivenom on the vessel. The lighthouse on the island has been automated since the 1920s, after the last keeper and his family died, by snakebite, by lighthouse tower fall trying to escape, by means that the official reports recorded in detail. You cannot visit Ilha da Queimada Grande. The reason is not the Navy. The reason is what the Navy is keeping you away from. The third is in the North Atlantic, 12 kilometers off the southern coast of Iceland. Surtsey did not exist before 1963. On November 14th of that year, a fishing boat called the Ísafjörður II observed a column of smoke rising from the sea. The seafloor below was 130 meters deep. By the morning of November 15th, an island had emerged, built by a submarine volcanic eruption. The eruption continued for 3.5 years, ending in June 1967. By the time it stopped, the new island measured 2.7 square kilometers. Surtsey was given a unique designation. From its first month, the Icelandic government and a council of scientists declared the island a nature reserve. The purpose? To observe the colonization of a sterile landmass by life, the arrival of seeds carried by wind, sea, and birds, the establishment of the first lichens and mosses, the first invertebrates, the first nesting birds, the first vascular plants. The opportunity was unique. The conditions for observation were unique. The contamination of the experiment by visiting humans had to be prevented. Since 1963, Surtsey has been closed to all but a handful of authorized scientists. They visit only under strict protocol. They may not take seeds with them, they may not bring food or live plants. They are housed in a single small hut, which is the only building on the island. The number of permitted visits annually is in the low single digits. As of 2026, fewer than 100 people have ever set foot on Surtsey. UNESCO inscribed the island as a World Heritage Site in 2008, citing its scientific value as a pristine natural laboratory. The island has also begun to shrink. Erosion by Atlantic waves has reduced its area from a 1967 peak of 2.7 square kilometers to approximately 1.3 square kilometers in 2024. Scientific projections estimate that by approximately 2150, Surtsey will be reduced to a small rocky outcrop. Before then, what has happened to it, the biology of how life arrived, what survived, what failed, will be documented in detail no other natural laboratory has provided. You cannot visit Surtsey. The lock on the door of the hut is held by the Icelandic Institute of Natural History. The fourth is hidden in the Ural Mountains. Mezhgorye, in the Republic of Bashkortostan, Russia, is a closed city. Its population is approximately 17,000. It does not appear on most Russian maps. It is not listed in standard tourist registers. The route to it is restricted at multiple checkpoints, and entry is permitted only to residents and a small number of authorized military and civilian personnel. The city was founded in 1979. It services a complex of underground military facilities believed to be associated with Mount Yamantau, a 1,640-meter peak south of the city, and Mount Kosvinsky in the neighboring Sverdlovsk region. The Yamantau complex has been the subject of speculation, intelligence assessment, and partial public disclosure since the early 1992. The Russian government has acknowledged construction at the site, but has, at various points, described its purpose as a mining operation, a strategic food storage facility, or a backup government command center. Western intelligence agencies have, since the 1990s, assessed the complex as a strategic continuity of government installation, designed to allow the Russian state to survive a nuclear strike on Moscow. The full scale of the underground works is unknown publicly. Construction has continued, with periods of suspension and resumption, since the late 1970s. American intelligence services raised concerns about the project repeatedly in the 1990s and 2000s. Russian responses have not been definitive. Mezhgorye is, in 2026, one of approximately 35 closed administrative territorial formations in Russia, ZATO in the Russian acronym. The total population of all ZATO settlements is approximately 1.2 million. The pattern of closed cities in Russia dates to the Soviet era's nuclear, biological, and aerospace programs. Some have been opened in the post-Soviet period. Mezhgorye has not. You cannot enter Mezhgorye. The fence is part of the Russian state. The mountain it serves is part of, by the inference of every Western analyst who has examined the project, the architecture by which the Russian state intends to survive an event that destroys the rest of the country. The fifth is in southwest France. The Lascaux Caves were discovered on September 12, 1940, by 4 teenagers and a dog named Robot in the Vézère Valley of the Dordogne. The dog disappeared into a hole. The boys followed. They found, on the walls of an interconnected complex of underground chambers, more than 600 painted figures and roughly 1,500 engravings. The paintings, depictions of aurochs, horses, deer, ibex, and one figure that has been interpreted as either a man or a shaman in trance, have been dated to between 17,000 and 21,000 years before the present. They are among the most accomplished examples of Upper Paleolithic art ever found. The cave was opened to the public in 1948. Over the following 15 years, an estimated 1,800 visitors a day entered the chambers. The carbon dioxide from human breath, the heat from human bodies, and the change in humidity caused by air movement triggered the rapid growth of algae and fungi on the walls. The paintings began to deteriorate. By 1963, the deterioration was severe enough that the French Ministry of Cultural Affairs, under André Malraux, closed Lascaux permanently. Since 1963, access has been restricted to a small number of conservation scientists, and even their entry is carefully limited. A 2008 outbreak of black fungal growth on the walls, Ochroconus lascauensis, a previously unknown species named for the cave, required emergency intervention and a near total cessation of human visits. Researchers now monitor the cave's atmosphere, humidity, and microbial flora remotely, entering only when biologically necessary. For the public, a series of full-scale replicas exists. Lascaux 2, 1983, Lascaux 4, 2016, recreating the chambers exactly. These are visited by hundreds of thousands of tourists annually. The originals, 20 meters below ground in the limestone of the Vézère Valley, are seen in any given year by fewer than a dozen people. You cannot visit the real Lascaux. The reason is that visiting it, in the act, was destroying it. The sixth is beneath the Vatican. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, until 2019 known as the Vatican Secret Archive, before Pope Francis ordered the name change to address what he called a negative connotation, contains the central historical records of the Holy See. It runs to approximately 85 kilometers of shelving. It contains documents going back to the 8th century. It holds papal correspondence, censorship records, conciliar minutes, and the original transcripts of, among many other things, the trial of Galileo Galilei, the petitions of Henry VIII for annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, and the surviving paperwork of the Spanish Inquisition. Access is not impossible. It is, however, restricted to credentialed academic researchers who must apply individually, in advance, with documentation of their academic affiliation and a specific research request. Only documents from before 1958 are routinely available. The papacy of Pius XII, controversial for its handling of the Holocaust, was open to researchers in March 2020 after Pope Francis released the records. Documents from the pontificates of John the 23rd and after remain closed. The full archive, the part below the surface, is not browsable. A researcher does not walk into the stacks. A researcher requests a specific document. The document is retrieved by archive staff and brought to a designated reading room. Photography is not permitted. The archive employs around 30 people. The reading room can seat 60 researchers at a time. In a typical year, roughly 1,500 scholars are granted access. The secret of the old name referred not to the content of the documents, but to their original status as the personal property of the Pope. Not a public archive, but a private one. The 2019 renaming was, in this sense, technically accurate. The reality is that the great majority of the Vatican Apostolic Archive remains in 2026 closed to anyone who is not specifically permitted. You cannot enter the Vatican Apostolic Archive unless the Church decides you may. The Church has decided this since 1881 for fewer than 80,000 individual researchers, an average of about 550 per year over more than a century. The seventh is the most accessible of the seven, and in a sense, the most secret. In Atlanta, Georgia, at the World of Coca-Cola Museum, there is a vault. The vault contains the original written recipe for Coca-Cola. The recipe is, in industrial secret terms, one of the most valuable pieces of information in the world. The formula has not been patented. Patenting would require disclosure. It has been kept as a trade secret for over 130 years. The recipe was kept until 2011 at the SunTrust Bank in Atlanta. In December of that year, it was moved to a purpose-built vault at the company's flagship museum, where it sits behind a metal door surrounded by a steel cage, in a room where visitors may stand but not enter the inner chamber. The company has, since the early 20th century, maintained a corporate policy that at any given time, only 2 senior employees know the full formula. The 2 are not permitted to travel on the same airplane. The Coca-Cola formula is, in legal terms, not protected by any law. It is protected by the simple practice of never writing it down where it can be obtained and never telling more than 2 people who could be coerced or compromised. The strategy has worked for 130 years. The drink is consumed in 2026 in every country on Earth except North Korea, where it is unavailable, and Cuba, where it is technically prohibited under the US embargo. The formula room can be visited. The formula cannot be read. These are 7 of the closed places on Earth. There are others. The pattern across all of them is this. The modern world has, on its face, no closed doors. Every continent is reachable by aircraft. Every ocean is mapped. Every mountain is climbed. Every news event is, within seconds, transmitted globally. And yet, the planet still contains rooms, islands, caves, archives, and vaults that in 2026 you cannot enter. Some by law, some by physics, some by the choice of the people who live inside, some by the choice of the institutions that hold the keys. The Sentinelese on their island do not know that they are protected by the Indian Navy. They believe, with reasonable evidence, that they are protecting themselves. The volcano on Surtsey is being watched, but not visited. The fungus in the Lascaux Caves is being managed, but the paintings are not being viewed. The vault under Mezhgorye is being expanded, but its purpose remains stated only by inference. These are the closed places. The modern world has not entered them. The modern world in 2026 has decided not to. And in 7 places at least, perhaps in dozens more, the door is, by deliberate human decision, still shut.